Welcome to the Backlot 605 podcast. I am one of your hosts. I am Casey Kelderman.
I'm Brian Mensing.
And today we are joined with a very special guest for a special interview. We are joined by the writer-director of the Shudder original film, Deadtectives, Tony West. Tony, how are you today?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So we're going to just jump right into this. We want to talk about Deadtectives because we both had the chance to watch this. We both really enjoyed the film. We thought it was a really fun...
It's really fun.
Really fun horror comedy, and that's one of my favorite subgenres of film. So basically, can you tell us a little bit what the film is about?
Certainly. The Deadtectives is about a team of paranormal ghost hunters who have their own reality show. And at the movie's beginning, they're essentially con artists. They go in with gullible people and convince them their houses are haunted and leave them far worse than they found them for the betterment of their show. But that show is on the verge of cancellation. So in a last-ditch effort, these detectives quickly realize they have no idea how to handle the situation.
Like I said, we both really enjoyed the film. When I did the review on it, I kind of described it as a cross between Ghostbusters meets Ghost Adventures. And I'm kind of a fan of both of those in obviously different ways. But kind of where did you come up with this idea for the film? Were any of those inspirations for you coming up with this idea?
Talking about those two specific examples, obviously, as a kid of the 80s, I grew up a huge fan of Ghostbusters, without question. All the way through Peter Jackson's The Frighteners in the mid-90s. I just was a huge fan anytime I can get my hands on one of those movies.
This is my kind of guy.
Funny enough, the Ghost Adventures is a very big influence on this movie. I used to work on a show called The Soup. With Joel McHale, and we would do a lot of spoofs with some reality show stars, and the Ghost Adventures crew came on the show a few times, and right when I was sort of getting the inspiration for this idea, they actually came on the show, and it was just awesome to just watch them sort of behind the scenes and the camaraderie they had with each other and the sort of fun they had with the concept. True believers, no doubt about that, but also really fun guys, and that certainly was fun to see and definitely added to some of the inspiration, so it was great.
I find it funny you bring up that you worked with Joel McHale because the main character in your film, Sam, played by Chris Greer, he reminds me a lot of Joel McHale. Did you take anything away from his characters that Joel has played in the past into this character?
I worked on the suit for almost a decade, so it had to seep in there, whether it was consciously or subconsciously, no question. But the thing that I love about Chris Greer, and it's the same quality that Joel McHale has, and it's such a rare quality, and they have this amazing talent to play unlikable people. I mean, people that kind of have some selfish, egotistical character traits, but still come across 100% charming and lovable. And it's such a rare feat to pull off, so that's certainly something those guys have in common in spades.
Yeah, looking at it, some of my favorite characters are those characters, you just hate them, but you cannot help but love them.
Because you hate them.
Yes.
Because you hate them. One of my two of my favorite characters, just on television, are Joel McHale's Jeff Winger on Community, and then Dennis Reynolds on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Your character of Sam plays, or your main character in your film, Sam, he very much reminds me of those type of characters.
No question. Those guys are on the Mount Rushmore, characters like that as well. I was a huge fan, obviously, of Chris's show. I don't know if you guys are familiar. You're the Worst on FX. Just one of my favorite shows on TV. And he plays truly a character that has some of the most unlikable traits in a character, and you love him every step of the way. And so it was through that show, You're the Worst, that I was like, that's the guy. It's got to be Chris Greer to pull this off, because I knew what a tightrope it was going to be to sort of tread the line between comedy and horror, and also have a character like Sam who's extremely controlling, extremely one-dimensional in what he wants, and sort of at the detriment of his own family members and friends. And I needed somebody like that to pull that character off, and Chris Greer delivered.
So, kind of going off of that, this is a Shudder original. How did Shudder get involved and bringing this to the streaming service?
Yeah, we were so hyped about that too, because it's just taking, I'm a huge horror fan. Obviously, so many influences of horror films in the past came to this, and to be able to premiere this movie, present this movie to a place like Shudder that is for true horror fans is a dream come true. And, their initial interest came, we were so fortunate. We got to premiere at two great festivals. We got to premiere at the Sitges Film Festival in Spain, and then at the Telluride Horror Show. And just had really just tremendous screenings and just tremendous reception. It was more than I could have ever dreamed for. And I know that really piqued Shudder's curiosity, and it went from there.
Nice.
Now, you do mention that this is really based on, some of the horror films you kind of grew up watching. Are there any like particular horror films that you looked at, trying to develop the story or what we eventually got on the screen?
Certainly, to be bluntly honest, I sort of have growing up, I had a very sort of standoffish relationship with horror films, in the sense that I'm a wimp, and like as I was growing up, like the first two times I ever went to a movie theater, and I'm like 3 or 4 years old, within 15 minutes of the movie starting, whoever was with me, my parents, had to take me screaming from the movie theater. So whatever this sort of suspension of disbelief that people have, I have like triple the dose of that. And one of those movies was E.T. These weren't like horror schlock films. I couldn't even get past the early E.T. film. I was like 4 years old, where Elliot's outside and E.T.'s in the shed and they're rolling the ball. That was it. That petrified me, and we had to leave the theater then. And so growing up, I had a hard time like diving into like the Freddy Kruegers and Jasons until I was a little bit older. So my horror film growing up was Scooby-Doo. And like I just was fascinated with this cartoon. It was like my gateway, sort of my entryway into the paranormal world, and it was about what I could take until I got a little bit older and finally summoned the courage to delve deeper. And so my whole sort of horror experience started when I was probably in the early 90s. I think the first film I saw that really sparked my curiosity, not just as a fan, but also as like, oh, I would love to do this one day, was Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, Brain Dead. That was one of my, like, I saw that film and it just blew me away. And that opened my eyes to Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead series. And that's when I really saw how much fun you can have with the genre, where you can be spooky, creepy, but also make people laugh. And all the way through Peter Jackson's The Frighteners. And then you sort of had this amazing, like, horror comedy renaissance, at least in my eyes. Started with Shaun of the Dead, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and all of those films, all the way through What We Do in the Shadows just a couple of years ago. So I've always had an affinity for those films since I was a young child.
I like the fact you bring up In the Shadows and whatnot. It's just a completely different. You really have to delve into just the type of comedy that those guys bring.
Oh, it's fascinating. They're amazing. Love that film.
I do have a question here. Just because you brought it up a couple times, and it's probably one of my favorite Peter Jackson movies outside of Lord of the Rings, and that is The Frighteners. I think it's a very unappreciated Michael J. Fox movie. When we get to the way that you end Deadtectives, did you ever see as maybe flipping it as opposed to having their friend helping them catch the ghosts or finding these ghosts, as opposed to being that one that's kind of causing the ruckus and kind of going back into their rut? Or
no, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely played with that concept, but I love that. I think one thing with the Javier character we like so much is he was, one thing I wanted to explore with that character in this movie that I personally liked was that, he at the beginning of the film is almost he's kind of a jerk. He's very standoffish. He's very sort of biting and sarcastic, and I love sort of that it wasn't until he, in the afterlife that he sort of strips away that facade, and it is a little bit more vulnerable. So we went that route instead with that character, where we made him more vulnerable and human and kind and helping after death than before death.
More human as a ghost than he was as a human.
Exactly.
Now, since you do bring up like all these like fun character things that you got to do with all the guys that you worked on, what was your favorite part about working on Deadtectives?
Without question, just we shot the entire movie in Mexico. We shot in Mexico City, and we shot in this great city called Villahermosa, which is down by the Guatemalan border. So shooting that, the vast majority of the crew was from Mexico. Plus, we had actors like Chris Gere and the actor who played Lloyd, named David Newman, who were from the UK. A lot of people came from Los Angeles. So by the time we were done, I just loved the concept of it's a small indie film, but we had people from all over the world, sort of in this really unique location, making this movie, and just watching that sort of camaraderie of all these talents. Half the crew couldn't understand the other half, just the language barriers and all of that. But just watching everybody, despite all that, work together was fascinating. It was just fascinating, and that without question. And then obviously, I had such luck to work with some amazing special effects artists, some amazing special effect makeup artists, CGI artists, and to just be able to, for really the first time in my life, in my career, be able to use the imagination and work with a team that we can bring this to life. That was fascinating.
Awesome. I guess just kind of going off of here, what is the next thing? What's the next thing on your slate? Where do you go from here?
we just without question, the producers of the movie, which is Bad Idea Films, and Jason Tomasco and myself, we 100% are dead set on continuing the sagas of Deadtectives again. We think there's still a lot of story to tell, and we're excited to do so.
I think that'd be fun, especially now that you've already kind of set down the characters. They kind of have their definition now that they've kind of made their way through the first one. And I could easily see, a couple, 2-3 movies coming out of this, and to even make a trilogy out of this.
We'd love that, and it's not so much a secret if you've seen the film, especially like the last moments and the last shot. But for me, I think what clicked with me kind of in the middle of, before we shot the film, but sort of as I was finishing up the writing stages, was, oh, this is an origin story of a true ghost hunting team. And that's what really made me even more excited than I was to begin with. So we're watching the evolution of this team that starts out as con artists that have to, or forced to, life and death situation, become the real thing by the end. Absolutely. And now I'd love to see where they go from here.
Yeah, that final shot in the film, I haven't really been excited to see something you know how you have it at the end of the movie. You're like, oh, I want to keep watching more. I want to know what happens next.
It's a great cliffhanger.
Yes, it's one of those. I haven't had that honestly in a while, especially from a horror film. I want to see more from this. That was the biggest thing I was left with.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear.
Now we have to ask this question because I feel like every haunted house film or movie about ghosts always has this type of story to it. So basically, is there any paranormal or unexplained things happening on set? Every movie has these type of things. Is there any crazy story that you have from the set?
We shot in a real mansion in Mexico City. So the exteriors of the house were shot in the city of Villahermosa in Tabasco, down by Guatemala, but the interiors were shot in Mexico City. And it's this old mansion. I believe it was built in the 1870s, 1880s. And when we were shooting there, everybody who was on the crew who was local had their little stories, not specific, but about how this place isn't good, and how it's not good to be alone in this place, and things like that. And even the underground, sort of the basement of this house, we couldn't use it. It was too small for filming, but it looked truly like a century-old dungeon, just with just stone walls with some people said it's just it could be claw marks on the stone, or maybe it's just normal wear and tear. Who knows? It sort of had that look, and it had this really old man owned the house, and hey, he let us use his house, nicest guy in the world. But everyone said that there were stories about him that I never became privy to. No one would ever really talk about it. It was very hush hush. But when we were shooting the film, he stayed on the film set and actually lived in that, if you watch the movie, the main hall, the main downstairs hall, is sort of the center of the entire movie, really. He lived in a little room during the entire production right off the side. And every once in a while, we're just making all this noise and doing this film, and we'd hear his little door open and the little creaking of the door, and he'd shuffle out and wouldn't say a word, and everyone would just go silent. And so I'm still to this day curious who this man is and what the backstory of that house is, but no one really knew. But they all swore there was something. So that's all I can tell you. But there's something happened in that house, but people aren't talking, and I'm still hunting for the answer.
So eventually, we're gonna get a movie just about the making of this movie, right?
There was some creepy atmospheric moments, but nothing specific, unfortunately. Not yet. We'll get to it. We'll get down to it.
That'll be in Deadtectives too.
Absolutely.
So like I mentioned to you before we started recording this, we do play a little game here on Backlot 605. It's one of our favorite things to do, called Schmucks Choice. So it's basically just like Sophie's Choice. We'll pit two movies in a head-to-head matchup in which one film will live and one will be erased from history. So we thought it'd be fun to throw a couple of horror comedies your way and see which one you would choose.
I love the fact.
All right.
I love the fact that some of these have already been mentioned too.
Yes,
and these were written an hour ago.
Yep. So that'll only make it a little tougher, I think. So, first one, Shaun of the Dead versus Zombieland.
Oh, that's man. Okay? So we're right. This is truly a Sophie's Choice. We're not even messing around. I thought I was going to get a softball with the first one.
No, we're going to jump you right into it.
He doesn't lob them. Right. He goes straight for the striking zone.
Yep. No doubt. I see. And this is the first one. I can only imagine where we're going from here. Okay, so I got to preface this one just a little bit. Zombieland is badass. Zombieland is amazing. But Shaun of the Dead wins this one. There's nothing I can do. Sorry, Zombieland. Shaun of the Dead, easy.
All right, so Shaun of the Dead wins for you. Next one, we're going to go with a couple Corey Feldman movies from the 80s.
Oh, I love it already.
Gremlins versus The Burbs.
Wow.
Two very different type of movies.
Totally. And do I answer this question as today, or do I get to answer this question as the 8-year-old version of me?
I want to hear both. I want to hear both versions from you.
The 8-year-old version of me, is like, I don't know what the other movie is. It's Gremlins, and so I discovered the other one much later, and that one would probably win now because I so appreciate it now. But I got to go with the first inspiration movie on this one. I'm going with Gremlins.
I still think it's funny you put these two together, to be honest. I was like, he needs to do like Gremlins and Critters. I'm like, I don't know where you're going with this, but I like it. All right, how about The American Werewolf in London versus Evil Dead 2?
Oh, love American Werewolf, but I'm one of those people. I know Evil Dead 2 tends, at least the circle of people I talk to, I feel like Evil Dead 2 might even slightly raise above Evil Dead. I don't know, how do you guys feel about that? If you mind me asking, where do you guys rank those two against each other, Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead?
I'm usually typically for Evil Dead 2 just because you can definitely see the improvement and the budget increase just between the two of them and how much he was working with just his friends on what little money he had to make that first one.
Absolutely. And that's the one that I think he hit his comedic stride as well. Like they really just nailed the tone on that one. So that's the winner. That's the winner here. It's got to be Evil Dead 2.
Evil Dead 2. All right, how about Tucker and Dale versus Evil versus Cabin in the Woods?
This is the hardest one. This is the hardest one you've asked so far, without question. Man, those are the two, like, when I first had the inspiration for this idea, I think within like a week I was watching those two movies, as well as Shaun of the Dead and a few of the other ones. That's tough. That's the toughest one you've asked me so far. I'm gonna go, and I want both movies to know that I love them both dearly, but I gotta go with Cabin in the Woods on this one because it kind of blew my mind when that movie came out. It kind of, in my opinion, raised the bar on how to play this, and in so many different ways. It was such a uniqueness to that movie that I hadn't seen yet. So Cabin in the Woods wins on that front.
As much as I love both these movies, I have to agree with him. Cabin in the Woods is literally throw everything in the kitchen sink and we're going to see what happens.
Absolutely.
All right. So you said that was probably the toughest one. I think we have one more that'll stump you, I think, here.
I'm still going to cringe at this one here.
All right. We're going to pit Ghostbusters versus Deadtectives.
Wow. That
nothing like putting him on the spot there, Casey.
And here's I'm going to answer this a little politically correct here. Here's the thing. You know how there's like amazing kids and amazing dogs out there, and they're just amazing, and you're like, wow, those kids and those dogs are just amazing, but they're not mine. So mine may be flawed. It may be a lot of things, but it's mine, and because of that reason, I gotta love it. So for that reason, I'm saying Deadtectives, even though we all know Ghostbusters is the pantheon of all these movies. We all know it.
Oh, I think you had the perfect answer.
I love the answer.
Yes,
I love the answer.
That is perfect. So we're gonna wrap it up here. Where can people find Deadtectives?
It is right now premiered on July 18th, so it's out and available on Shudder.
Absolutely. So if you guys have not subscribed to Shudder, please do. I love Shudder. Like, that is my go-to for anything streaming right now. And Tony, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
So much fun.
Yes, and I hope we didn't hurt you too much with our Schmucks Choice, especially pitting Ghostbusters versus your own film.
I'm a little scarred. It was hard, but it was all good fun, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a blast.
Absolutely. Tony, thank you so much for being on.
We appreciate all your time.
Thank you.